Well, and so basically, what I hope people can understand is, like, as we're looking at this, it's government directly funding a private business where they're profiting directly off of the tax dollars. We're still paying for that. We're still gonna have to go and pay for tickets, pay for everything. And so, really, as we look at it, it's not like a public, it's not like a park where you can go show up and your kids can play on the play stuff for free. It's a private business. And so these private businesses are directly profiting in a huge way off of our tax dollars, with us virtually seeing no return,
Yes.
which is why like 90% of people voted against it when it was proposed and continue. It's not like they voted one time.
Well, it's not a vote.
We're-
A lot of people think, well, we voted on this. Well, we've never
We
really
never
had
got a chance
We never
to
had
vote
a
on it.
referendum on it.
Mike and Bob, how did you guys even get to know Jesse? Like, how did this all?
He is okay, some of the folks that are involved in the work we're doing. We're taking a stand against wasteful spending in Little Conway Canyon on building a $1.4 billion gondola that 80% of the public that are knowledgeable strongly are resisting. It's wrong on a lot of different reasons. And one of the gentlemen that got involved with us had worked with Jesse in the past, and knew Phil Lyman well, and also Trent Staggs. And Jesse was involved in their campaigns, and so he's been helping us think about how we can have impact and be influential.
That's huge. That's awesome. So yeah, I'm stoked to chat with you guys today because as I've gotten involved in politics or just in the state, like I don't even want to say I'm like involved in politics, just involved in starting to look outside of myself and see what's going on in our state. Because I think there's so much going on federally. Maybe there's something we can do, maybe there isn't. But I think at the very least, we can try to do what we can at home. And I think that's been like becoming more and more important to me. And it's just been crazy to see all these different things that are happening. And it's like, what do we want to become of our state in like the next 10 to 20 years? And so when I heard about what was going on with the gondola and how much money was being spent by regular citizens, this is what people don't realize is how your tax dollars are being used.
Are already going. to
That's right.
Yeah,
As
yeah.
we're speaking, it's being funded.
So, like, can you guys go through and just explain the gravity of the situation? Because from what I understand it, whether you're living in Tremonton or St. George, you're funding this.
Bob?
Yeah, so there was 2021, the legislature passed a bill that said there would be a new fund called the Cottonwood Canyons Transportation Investment Fund, specifically to fund transportation improvements in the Cottonwood Canyons. Now, everyone knew, since the governor had come out for it, some of the key Senate leaderships had come out for it, that fund was going to pay for the gondola. That fund was funded by our sales tax dollars, sales, fuel, and use tax dollars. So every time you buy groceries, a little bit of your tax dollars for those groceries is going into this Cottonwoods Transportation Fund, which looks like it will have enough money in it to float a bond and build this $1.4 billion gondola up Little Cottonwood Canyon. Now, this gondola benefits 3 private companies. It would ease traffic perhaps a little bit if it works, but using buses could do it much cheaper, much less tax dollars, if it really is justified to use our tax dollars at all. So this sales tax dollars for food and fuel is across the state. Everyone in the state is paying into this gondola fund. The local communities are paying a little bit more because some of their local sales tax is also going into this fund. So that's kind of the context. That started in 2021. In addition to that, there has been some additional money out of the general fund appropriated. Total to date, by the end of this fiscal year, will be $380 million, our tax dollars, state tax dollars, sales tax dollars, that will be residing in this fund. Some of it has been spent already, but not much.
So this gondola is super essential, right? Because there's like a ton of residents living at the top or something, and everyone in the state will probably have to use it.
And the residents at the top or adamantly against it.
And the residents at the bottom
Bottom are
are
adamantly
adamantly against it. The more people know, the more they're saying no to this item. You know, when it comes down to it, $1.4 billion divided by the number of households in this state is $1,200 per household. So, you know, you think about that. The folks in St. George, the folks up around Bear Lake, they're paying for this thing, and they don't even know where Little Common Canyon is. And they probably never strapped on a pair of skis.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, someone wants us to pay for infrastructure that's supporting two private ski resorts.
So basically, the gondola just takes skiers from the bottom to the top
That's all it does.
for a private resort.
Yes. The
So if
two
we want to
private
ride
resorts,
this
yeah.
gondola, it's not free.
No.
Well, the head of UDOT has told me that he would like it to be free, that he'd like the taxpayers to pay for their gondola lift ticket. And my response to him is, well, if you're going to pay to lift them up to the ski area, just go ahead and buy them the ski lift tickets. It makes no sense why the taxpayers would be paying for skiers to get up to the ski area.
Yeah, exactly. Especially after we just funded it for.
Yeah, after we
5
just paid
years.
the capital cost. Yeah.
The operating costs are going to be over $7 million for annually. So that's maintenance and operating cost. And
that-
these are UDOT's numbers. They're not
Yeah,
ours.
nobody believes that they'll really come in for that. Yeah.
So leading up to this, typically they'll run like some types of surveys or things like that to see was it voted on or
So-
what.
So there's a very prescribed process by the federal government called the National Environmental Policy Act that says you have to do an assessment of the impacts, environmental impacts, social, economic, watershed, and so on. And that's a lengthy process, and at multiple stages, they request public feedback. So when they finally published their final plan, called the Final Environmental Impact Statement, the FEIS, that was the first time they told the public what they were really doing. They got over 13,000 public comments. 89% were against. We know because we counted them all
them.
with some students at the university. So overwhelming opposition through the public feedback mechanism.
So how did this even get laid out in place? Because like there's these two ski resorts. They're like, hey, we want to build a gondola. And I'm assuming there's some type of approval process, even if they wanted to pay for it all themselves.
Yes.
But what's kind of the mechanism used, or the shifting of the cards? So they're like, hey, we need this, but we need you to pay for it.
So you're really, what's the genesis? Where did it come from? Well, obviously, if I'm a private business owner, I'd love to get the government to pay for my infrastructure.
Of
So that's
course.
been going on for some time. But really, where it got it going, there was two former politicians turned developers that kind of brought this to bear, and connections in the right kinds of places. Basically, before we knew it, UDOT got chartered to do a study, and the wheels start turning. Some people are questioning whether or not there was a predetermination. I'll leave that to history to determine whether that's in place or not. But it sure felt like, regardless of what the public wanted, regardless of what the data said, we still ended up with something that 89% of us didn't want. Again, it comes down to about a couple entities. Again, a couple developers, some landowners at the mouth of the canyon said, "There's a business opportunity here. Why don't we see if we can't get the state to fund this shiny object that will be a tourist attraction?"
Yeah, the politicians that initiated it own about 34 undeveloped acres at the base of the gondola. They have plans to build 3 different townhouse condominium developments, which is be great Airbnb businesses, some restaurants.
The boutique hotel.
Yeah, boutique hotel. And so almost immediately when a project like this is announced, their property value goes up. They should have recused themselves from voting on funding for this, but they didn't. Now, we're both business people, so we're all for folks making money by investing money, doing hard work, but investing our tax money to make a small group of people more wealthy, particularly when you're in positions of power, that is just not right.
100%. Can we say who these people are?
Sure. One was a former president of the Senate, Wayne Niederhauser. One of them was a former city council in Sandy City, Chris McCandless. The property owner is the owner of Lakai. I'm lost for a second.
Kevin Gates.
Kevin Gates, who also owned property at the mouth of Big Cottonwood that developed some of that property as well.
Along with the other two.
Yeah, along with the other two. So this is a repeat pattern. Both canyons have seen development going on with these individuals involved.
And so they get in, they're in what, center leadership. And so like, hey, we really want to use our natural beauty here in Utah and get access to the public. Right now, the only people using it are people that are really into the outdoors. Not everyone loves the outdoors. So how about we build some restaurants here where people can go and enjoy it. We built some townhouses and a gondola that people can actually go, not have to hike up, but actually can ride up there and access it whenever they want. Is that kind of like how the conversation goes in the Senate? And they're like, sounds good.
And I think it will be a tourist attraction. It will be the world's longest gondola. It's going to be, from a mechanical engineering standpoint, it's going to be pretty spectacular. That canyon is amazing, as you know, this narrow glacial canyon. So the views will be spectacular going up there. And I think it will draw some additional tourists. For the folks at the bottom, I think it's really important because it will draw tourists in the summer. Otherwise, they've got a wintertime ski village down there. So this will help monetize their property all year. Again, I have nothing against people monetizing their property. Just don't use our tax dollars to do it. Same with Snowbird. Snowbird, has been building up more and more summer activity. This will help them to increase their summer activity.
Well, we could do the same with less intrusive measures.
Just some decent busing.
Right.
They reduced busing by 75% in 2020?
Yeah.
And this season they've restored some of that. So it's still 30% less than it was, even though in 2023, the state legislature gave them $150 million. $100 million out of the general fund, $50 million out of the Cottonwood Canyons Fund to improve busing. But it's still 30% less than it was in 2021. And it's hard to understand how that could be.
Well, and so basically what I hope people can understand is, like, as we're looking at this, it's government directly funding a private business where they're profiting directly off of the tax dollars. And there is a benefit in terms of tourism or like going to be able to see cool sites, but we're still paying for that. We're still going to have to go and pay for tickets, pay for everything. And so really, as we look at it, it's not like it's not like a park where you can go show up and your kids can play on the play stuff for free. It's a private business. And so these private businesses are directly profiting in a huge way off of our tax dollars, with us virtually seeing no return.
Yes.
Which is why like 90% of people voted against it when it was proposed and continue. It's not like they voted one time.
Well, it's not a vote. A lot of people think, well, we voted on this. Well, we never
got a chance.
We never
to
had a
vote on
referendum on it. As Bob said, we read each of the individual comments, all 13,089 of them, and then categorized them in terms of, was this a strongly, from this comment, can we determine whether they're advocating for or against the gondola? I mean, there were some that it was hard to determine, but we clearly came out as 88.6% that were in opposition. And not only just in opposition, violent opposition. They explained why. They didn't say this is not a good idea. They would say this is not a good idea for these reasons. And they dealt then with questions about it's breaking the firewall between private money and public sector, the kinds of things. They just basically were saying it's wrong on so many different levels to be engaging this kind of a conversation. Little Cottonwood Canyon is a very unique space. I mean, we disapprove of this for a lot of reasons. The wasteful spending, using money in the private sector to pick winners and losers, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we oppose it from that standpoint. There's many other people that oppose it from a standpoint of you're putting 22 structures plus 2 angle stations. That's 24 man-made structures, anywhere from 100 to 200 feet tall. These are not
262
262. Thank you.
It's like 300 feet tall.
They're
huge.
tall.
They're
So
huge, yeah.
that's an 8 mile. Every mile, there's 3 massive structures. So if a person's driving up there to enjoy the scenery, you're going to see these man-made structures in this canyon. And a lot of people go up there just to get away from the concrete and the steel and the asphalt that exists in the valley floor. Now we are basically moving those same kinds of things into this pristine environment.
You're industrializing the wild.
Precisely. So it's not just, are we doing this for skiers? We're doing it and we're excluding people that are interested in going up there to photograph nature, to hike, to fish, to camp. We're basically then destroying that experience so that we can support 2 private ski areas.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stop at any of the hiking trails. It only stops at the ski areas.
Yes.
So you still have to drive if you want
Right.
to go hiking or
And it's
fishing
not
or
cheap.
whatever.
Like skiing isn't cheap. So even like I'd say there's a big portion of the public, which there's limited ski passes. So ski passes get more and more expensive every year. It's not like everyone can afford a $300 to $500, $1,000 pass to go skiing. And then so it's like, who's this really benefiting? It's the people that can afford even the passes in the first place, but ultimately it's 100% the private business.
Well, and so we've used that expression exactly. Obviously, the industry is pricing people out of the sport.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be more and more wealthy to experience that. So here we are. We're taking public dollars to support it. We call that Robin Hood financing in reverse.
Mm-hmm. So 100% is it. So what got you guys so involved with this even to begin with?
Oh, well, we have a love for the canyon. We try to be somewhat principled in terms of how we spend money, and I don't know. It's a slippery slope. Once you start believing in something, it's hard to walk away from it.
Yeah.
And I think the more we looked into it and understand how it was being financed, there's some good environmental groups, Save Our Canyons, Salt Lake Climbers Alliance, Friends of Alta, that oppose this for the environmental impact. Yeah, it's going to have a big environmental impact, as he said, but from our standpoint, what we were outraged with was just a ripoff of the taxpayers. As you say, skiers tend to be some of our more wealthy citizens, but yet, the average Joe and Jane on the street buying groceries are the ones who are paying for this. So to make it a little bit easier for the wealthy skiers to go, it just didn't seem like the right use of our money.
Well, I even take even further than that. It's the average Jane and Joe to build something for the wealthy skiers, but even the wealthy skiers and people who do ski are being charged more. Yeah. They're going to be charged even higher premium, so they're even going to be paying more.
And they're against it as well.
Yeah, and then it's really just these individuals that you guys said who are own the land at the base, own the land at the top, own the ski resorts. Yeah. Those are the only real winners in this, and the worth of this is billions of dollars. For them exclusively. For them, and people will say, well, what about the taxes they're going to pay? The taxes they're going to pay are never going to offset the amount of money we're going to give them.
Absolutely.
Like it's going to be, we're going to be overpaying for their development and their investment far more than the public will ever benefit in terms of dollars.
So we also look at it from a standpoint, obviously, we're arguing against it from a standpoint of it's the wrong use of public money. We think it's wasteful, et cetera. But the other issue, we analyze it, it won't work. It will not solve the problem.
There's that issue as well, yeah.
In terms of being able to bus or transport the amount of people.
Yes, the argument is congestion. We're doing this because it solves congestion. All it does is it moves congestion downhill.
Well, yeah, there's that. Plus, they have not analyzed the line to get on the gondola. If you look, this is really being done for about 20 days, powder days and holidays and some of the peak weekends. So, $1.4 billion to ease traffic on 20 days is crazy in itself. But if you look at the traffic pattern on those 20 days, almost everybody gets there in the first 2.5 hours. They want to get that powder run. If the thing opens at 8, they've built a parking structure to hold 5,000 people. Well, it only moves 1,050 people an hour. So the last people into the parking structure are not going to get to the top for 5 hours. So, I mean, there's going to be a giant line to get on it. You're going to be waiting in that line for hours. People will do it once, and then they're just going to drive up. Heck with the traffic, right?
Yeah.
So they haven't even thought out the traffic flow on it, which is crazy. They could at least have done a good analysis of that.
They'll still have to use busing anyways.
But buses are cars,
But
Yeah.
but their plan is to quit busing as soon as the gondola operates.
which is a lot of people don't realize that because this thing is broken up into phases, and in the final phase, the third phase, busing will no longer take not only will not take people up the canyon, it will not even bring them to the mouth of the canyon. So people are going to be driving in their cars to the mouth of the canyon and have to make a determination. Do I keep driving in my car up into the canyon, or do I stop and try to park in this 2,500 car garage?
And get a long lift line.
Long lift line, schlep my stuff out of my car, over to an elevator or an escalator, wait for an open elevator, schlep them up the stairs or the elevator to get out and wait in line, as Bob said.
For maybe 5 hours.
Yeah, it could.
The
At the worst
last
case
people could,
scenario,
yeah.
that's
And then coming down, you have the same thing, right?
right.
Well, not even worst case scenario, maybe 2 hours. They're
Yeah.
sitting there.
Yeah, on a modest day, they might be 2 hours to get down, and there'll be the same thing in the afternoon.
And then they're going to say, maybe I'll just take my car. They drive their
Exactly.
car anyways, and they
Exactly.
get up there,
Yeah.
but maybe they get stuck because not everyone has cars that can make it all the way.
So that's one thing that they have done on a positive note is that they just passed a law
The traction law.
that allows the unified police to fine people if they don't have four-wheel drive, chains, and good snow tires.
And we think that if you do more of those small incremental things,
Yeah.
you can have a very positive impact. If we were promoting carpool usage, higher occupants vehicles, right now it's at about 1.9, average 1.9 of persons per car. If we could get that in excess of 3, that reduces the number of vehicles. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. If you stand out and watch the cars driving up these canyons in the mornings, you'll see that 50% of them have one person. Now, the problem, of course, is we as Utahns are going to have to change our behavior. No longer can you say, let's go up and take a couple runs. We'll do 2 runs and come back. Those days are gone. We have marketed this state. We have developed this state. The people are here. And you can't go back. So some of those days are gone, but we're going to have to modify our behavior in terms of using public transportation, buses, or carpooling, or high occupancy vans, and we need to figure out ways and how we can implement those kinds of incremental things as opposed to this massive 8-mile long gondola, longest in the world. But actually, it's not. As Bob would point out, it's not one gondola; it's 3 separate ones. And if anybody, this has been marketed from a standpoint that that the gondola is a fail-safe solution. It's going to work all the time. Anybody who's ever ridden on a ski lift, which is basically the same technology, of course, magnitude by a factor, they stop, they break down. The gondola or the tram at Snowbird shuts down because of ice and winds. They occasionally have to be evacuated. If anybody thinks that that's not subject to this, they're fooling themselves. This is not one gondola. It's 3 separate systems, each one subject to breakdown and failure. So it would not be flawless. And think about the problems of trying to evacuate a system. We're not talking about a ski lift where you're up in the air maybe 25 feet or so. But we're talking about a couple hundred feet. Evacuating that's not going to be a pretty sight. And I would not want to be part of that. I would not want to be stuck up there overnight, as we've seen some gondolas and trams break down, and people are stuck overnight. What happened at Sandia Mountain in New Mexico. And to think that it wouldn't happen here, people are fooling themselves.
That's crazy. That's one of the best arguments against it I've heard. Is like there's a traffic issue that's not going to be able to get everyone up there in a timely manner. Or even operate fully for everyone that needs it. But then if it does break down, everyone's losing at that point.
And you see, people don't think about that. So where do you think the people that would be evacuating these guests from these towers that are hanging up 100 to 200 feet in the air? If you poke around and you take a look at how UDOT's got it planned, the first responders are purportedly would be coming from the fire stations at the mouth of the canyon. In other words, the gondola would not be staffed to
evacuate.
evacuate. They're going to rely on public folks from fire stations, et
Another
cetera.
expense.
Now, what happens if the road is shut down and closed?
Oh, yeah. So you mean if
Yeah,
you need
so
evacuation?
You need to
Yeah.
evacuate. How are you going to get these people up there to get these people off?
Yeah, and that's
Are they going to snowshoe up there for 4 hours?
Well, that's
or
the point.
and
5 hours?
proponents have said, well, this provides an alternate way to get down, but the two catastrophic events that have fairly high probability are one, an earthquake in the Wasatch Fault. United States Geological Survey says there's a 47% chance of a 6.7 earthquake, which or higher, which is getting close to the one we just saw in Miramar, occurring by 2050. Now, a number of years ago, the Teller lift at Keystone, its bull wheel snapped, and what that did is it put slack into the cable, which caused all of the chairs to go like that. Everybody who did not have their bar down went. Now, can you imagine a 262-foot cable with 35 people in these cars with an earthquake? They're going to go up and down. The other real risk here is forest fires. The U.S. Forest Service says that there's more than an 80% higher chance of a fire in Little Cottonwood Canyon than in the rest of Salt Lake County. We've seen a fire up in Parleys County. We've seen a fire down in Alpine. It's just a matter of time before Little Cottonwood Canyon is going to see a forest fire again. You're not going to put people on a gondola if there's a fire in that canyon. They're going to have to come down the road or stay up at the top until it's controlled. If they're already in there when a fire spreads quickly, like the ones in LA recently, it's going to be ugly.
Especially with
it's going
the
to be really
wind.
nasty.
And
Yes.
you're up there right above the flames. What does that do? Hey, we've all cooked things above flames.
In a plastic car.
Yeah. That's,
It's not pretty. So we don't think it's a good, safe alternative to the road. Quite the opposite. It poses some interesting risks of its own.
that's crazy. Everything, as you keep bringing up more and more things, I'm like, how do people? So who's voting on this ultimately at the end of the day? Like, who's passing this and improving this to get all the way through to where it's at now?
Well, we from day one when we started looking into this, we said this is a political issue. It's whether this goes or stops, it goes to the legislature. Right now, we think it's being driven by a handful of people, but UDOT is the spearhead of this. And here we have a bureaucracy that's not voted. They really don't care what the public thinks. They're driven by the leadership on Capitol Hill, so we've known from day one that somewhere along the line the legislature is going to have to step up and determine, is this the right use of our taxpayer dollars? And we've been working hard to try to help folks understand that this just does not make sense. One, the public doesn't want it, but then just from it, as Bob and I are pointing out, it hasn't been thought through. The risks have not been properly assessed, and we're violating core principles around the role of government. And it's wrong on so many levels. So we've been doing our best to try to help folks understand what it is. The legislature's pretty busy, and they're trying to balance a lot of things. But this is one that should be more obvious in terms of conservative fiscal policies.
Yeah.
We're violating it right and left.
Well, it's a lot of money.
And in terms of government overreach, we're violating it, right and left.
So where's it currently at in this stage? Like, is it passed? Like, did the legislator vote on it? Do they need to step in? Like, what's like the...
So they put the funding in place as of last year.
The legislature did.
The legislature, House Bill 488, I believe was the number. And what that did, I said starting 2021, money was flowing into this fund, but it was capped at $20 million a year. And if you run the numbers out with inflation, it would never get to 1.4 billion or even to a point where you could float a bond and pay for the bond. But in 2024, this one piece of legislation removed that cap. And so now it's just growing and growing. If you do the numbers, by 2031, they'll have enough to float a bond and begin construction, have it ready for the Olympics in 2034. So
is this all an effort for the Olympics? Or...
Well, I think that's what Snowbird really wants it. I think Some other proponents, like Governor Cox, I think also wants it as kind of a showcase piece of technology for the Olympics as well. Early in his first term, he said, we need a flashy project that would bring us notoriety. He mentioned specifically the Golden Gate Bridge. I think this is his Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But again, couldn't we build something that added more value to more Utahns than this one gondola of this little canyon for 2 ski areas?
I think he's kind of sees it as a legacy project for
Yes,
himself.
yeah.
And so it's really Governor Cox pushing it through. And then with the House,
Yeah.
it's been voted on to approve the funding.
Yes, the funding
Everyone's
is there.
voting on it.
And they're paying into it, and I think almost no one understands that.
So they're just like, oh, this gondola is going up. Like, have you guys been there in the committee meetings, or what's kind of the vibe that is going on in the House to cause our representatives to vote on this?
Well, it's incremental.
Yeah, yeah.
So, it's one of these things that's kind of like watching grass grow. You don't realize, that it's happened until it's done. And so incrementally, there's money, as Bob pointed out, there's $150 million that was carved out specifically to start to work on congestion. And that would be some incremental kinds of things. So I think each phase basically gets funded separately, and there's a vote on it, but it hasn't received it always gets buried in some piece of larger legislation.
So it's just kind of like a earmark or some pork inside of something else.
Yes, yeah. So the initial 66 million was allocated in 2017. It's been going on that long. It was allocated for recreational hotspots, 100 million out of the general fund. 66 million of that was diverted. We think by the senator that would benefit from it into this little Cottonwood Canyon, and that was the genesis of the project. Shortly after that, we've seen through requests for information that letters came from those people to the governor, to the head of UDOT, urging them to build a gondola early on. So it's like you say, just pieces, 66 million there, 150 million here, 20 million every year. Now unbounded amount every year out of the sales tax has just been dripping into that.
It's kind of like the boiled frog analogy.
Exactly.
It's just kind of like, oh, maybe we need more. We're already so far into this.
Yeah.
Like we've already put in whatever, $300 million. So it's like, do we just want to put that to waste? Well, we should probably just put in a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's going to be really great for the state once we have it done. The Olympics, we're doing the Olympics now. We should add that in
Yeah.
and have it done by then. That would be awesome.
So and I had sent a note to the county saying, look, you just raised the county sales tax for transportation. Half of the money in the sales tax raise was for transportation. I said, you've got enough for about 4 years, maybe 5 years of what you're raising the sales tax for in this fund. Use it for the county as a whole. The county paid it in. Use it for them. It's just sitting there now.
So one of the things we haven't talked about is that right now there's 3 lawsuits that are holding up effort on it. One's from Save Our Canyons, one's from the combined water districts of Salt Lake City and Sandy, and one's by the Friends of Alta, a group called Canyon Guard, which we're plaintiffs on. They're basically we're challenging it on processes that we use, that they didn't follow the NEPA process. So everything's kind of at a stop. But we also believe, though, there's things that UDOT could be doing that could be done outside of any of the lawsuit activity. For example, increasing busing to previous levels. It doesn't have anything to do with any parts of their study. In other words, we were operating at a higher level of busing before, so let's go back and implement that. And they're resistive to doing that. So we're still trying to figure out a way to how we can get that done.
They've talked about implementing tolling, which is part of that changing behavior. But you can't toll people unless you have a reasonable public transit system as an alternative. Otherwise, it's even more expensive to go skiing, and you're eliminating even more of the population from the sport.
So I think going all the way back, like UDOT is a government-ran
Yes.
industry, corporation. It's a
bureaucracy in a classic form.
Yeah, because it's public transportation. But I think one thing and I could be off on this, so you guys correct me because you're way more informed on this than I am, but it seems like it's been ran really inefficiently. and just in general. Like a lot of the things that it goes to don't actually benefit a huge bulk of the actual citizens.
But they seem to have one mindset that you can pave your way out of construction or out of congestion. And they're not real good about estimating either. If I think most recently their estimates on the I-15 expansion into Davis County, remember them coming back within the last year saying, "Oh, we were only off by 100%." Had to double their cost estimates. And no one believes that those numbers will come in. When was the last time you saw a government project come in on time? With all the benefits that were suggested at the cost. It doesn't just, they're just not, it's not done well.
And then looking at the gondola, I get a kick because in the final EIS and their record of decision, they said this first phase where they're going to do a little bit better busing before the gondola starts operating was going to cost $110 million. Last summer, they told the legislature, "Oh, just kidding, it's $241 million." So they haven't even started it, and it's 140% overrun.
So now you get on that slippery slope. You say, "Well, we got this amount invested. Yeah, we need a little bit more." So incrementally, this thing, you take one sip at a time. You get it down.
Boiling the frog.
Boiling the frog. So what's the real cost? What problem are we trying to solve? And that's another thing to think about. Is that at one point in time, we had some problems with the canyon closing down a couple of years back. I think it was closed for massive avalanches, just unprecedented. The canyon was shut down for a week. That happens like once in a lifetime. I mean, how many? Last year, what was it?
Largest recorded snowfall,
Exactly.
900 inches.
Exactly. So do you build something to solve for something that takes place once every 100 years? That's the problem. Is getting smaller and smaller. This year, we're going to have a good snowfall. Looks like it's going to be over 500 inches, which is great. How many days was the canyon closed as a result?
Yeah,
We haven't had any closures.
No, we've had some.
All day.
Oh, not all day, no.
Well, that's what we're. It seems like we're measuring it for. The problem we're trying to solve seems to be getting smaller. The storm patterns are causing us to have different. It's impacting the resorts and the roads differently. One of the things I've noticed is that when we're having an avalanche that might close the road, the canyons are closed. The resorts are closed as well. So let's say we could get guests up the hill to the resorts. They're going to wait in line because the ski area folks, the snow safety people, are out trying to open up routes. They can't get them open up and fast. So you're going to be waiting in line probably for a couple hours just because the same thing that causes problems in the canyon roads are causing problems in the resorts. We're having more avalanche issues inbounds than we've had previously. So what's the level of problem we're trying to solve? What's the impact on the taxpayers, and why are we, the taxpayers, being responsible for covering a business operating expense?
Well, the one thing I want to point out too, and I feel like I'm like, maybe this is where people like you're a conspiracy theorist, is when you look at like the projects with UDOT or with any construction project, who owns the construction companies that are doing all these projects? They're individuals. And a lot of times they even have ties in the legislature as well. And so that's where I like see these projects that come in and they say it's going to be $100 million. Just kidding. It's $240 million. It's like they see a place where they can earn some money and then they're like, oh, we can earn even more money. There's people becoming extremely wealthy off these projects and they estimate poorly on purpose so they can add more in later on down the road. And they're always going to be getting more and more money. And the money for this isn't just to fund the projects. It's funding people's lives. Like a lot of people are making a lot of money on building these roads, on building a lot of this infrastructure.
We'll let someone who does a better job in investigative reporting than Bob and I do on that one. That's going down a couple layers. I'm not going to suggest that's not an accurate depiction of what's happening. But we haven't poked around and looked at that.
And I think that's one thing we got to look into a lot more is like, as I've looked into, like you suggest with these guys who own the land at the bottom, the ski resort owners.
There's enough right there for folks to draw the conclusions that you need to draw.
Exactly. And the legislature doesn't make enough money. Like that's the thing is like, who are these people that run for office? It's getting more and more expensive to run for office. Like their Senate race is costing close to $200,000 now.
and I was talking to the one of the former presidents of the House, a leader of the House, and he lived in St. George, and just paying for his commute in his hotel room, he lost money. he lost money serving in the House.
That's another topic for another time, because you're
Yeah.
absolutely right.
Yeah.
Looking at what we require of these legislators, or what we pay them when they're in session, and we think, well, that's 45 days, so it's a part-time job. It's not. When they're out of session and they're not being compensated, they're still doing anywhere from 10 to 30 hours a week work per week, answering constituent calls and going to meetings and becoming knowledgeable on topics that they're. It is a full-time job. We're not being honest with people in the state in terms of what it means to be a legislator, and then to your point, who can afford to do that?
And where's the incentive? And that's what I like with all my business as I'm hiring employees or trying to obtain customers is where's the incentive for my employee to be a good worker? Where's the incentive for my customer to continue buying? And as I look at these legislatures, is like, where's the incentive to spend the money, to spend all the time campaigning,
Yeah.
and to invest all that you need to even get into the legislature?
Yeah.
Where's the incentive to even be there?
Yeah, so I think you find three types, right? You do find people whose incentive is to try to do good and affect the system. No question. There's a lot of politicians who do that.
And in my opinion,
Yeah.
I feel like those are the rarest.
And sometimes they get corrupted by the system once
Yes.
they're there, right?
Yeah, my background is organizational behavior, the whole psychology of work and all, and good people can be corrupted by the system, and it just happens.
The second category is people who want the power and the prestige, right? And there's plenty of people like that. And the third category is suggestion that they have something to gain, usually money, directly or indirectly, by having some of that power. And we've seen quite a bit of that.
Yeah, and I think that's like really where we have to look as Utahns is like, as we're looking to elect representatives and looking to elect people is like, who are the people that we actually want to represent us? And I would be great if people could spend more time vetting these candidates, because there are great candidates out there. And as I saw this past year, there's a lot of great candidates, but they just don't have, whether it's the money or the time, just resources in general to get in front of the public and spend enough money marketing. So people never even know about them.
Yeah,
But there are a lot of great people out there that want to be involved and do the right thing.
yeah,
But they're just getting priced out
yeah.
by people who have ulterior motives. So, well, I appreciate you both. Is there anything else that we need everyone to know? What can people do? That's like, what's like the action, the point of action where it's like, hey, you listen to this, you can take action. What can they actually do to help?
I would urge folks to ask their representative and senators to pass a bill in the interim session this year or in the regular session next winter that begins to spend this $300 million plus for a wider set of benefits to the community. We've already collected the money. Let's spend it. Let's not sit on it. Let's figure out what would do a lot of people good across the Wasatch Front.
I'd add on that is that taxpayers need to start challenging their legislators, as Bob says, to personally contacting them to question every dollar that we spend. Are we spending on the right kinds of things? Are we spending on things that benefit the larger number of Utahns? So what are we doing to really identify waste? I mean, I've had some people say, well, we need a Doge, we need Elon Musk to come out here. I'm going, well, that's scary, but the concept is right in terms of driving out waste.
We've got the opposite of Doge right now. As you say, in the last 10 years, our budget has gone up 130%.
Yes.
Whereas our population,
That's 7%.
13, 14% a year, our population is only growing at 7%. So essentially, we've doubled the amount of spending.
We're spending on things. I just don't think taxpayers understand how our spending has gone up. 10 years ago, it was $13 billion. It was over $30 billion this year.
That's wild.
I'm not seeing the level of services go up that represents that. So where's that money going? We're low on education, lowest in the country. There's so many things that if we're going to spend money, let's spend money on the
When
right
people
things.
say that, is people will say, well, we just got voted as the second best education system in the country. But what you're referring to is we spend the lowest per student
Yes.
of any other state in,
Yes.
in the union.
Yeah.
Well, I
Like
think,
the dollar allocated per student is by far the lowest.
I don't know what the criteria is on that, but I've had kids in the public school system here and in other states, and it is much less adequate here. Some of the reasons we score, like on the standardized testing, at the median or above, is because we have very little poverty. So we have very few poor school districts that bring that average down. So it's a bit of a statistical misnomer. You need to compare a suburban district here on national scores or whatever measure you want with a suburban district in almost any other state. Deep South would score poorly too, but
Yeah, well, it makes complete sense. Well, yeah, I really appreciate you guys. It's good to hear that people are doing their like research and getting involved at this level and bringing a lot of these issues to the forefront. I think something like a Doge, J.R. Bird, if you guys, he's brought up a lot how he just wants to go in, and he already is doing it a lot, is looking at the budget himself for fun and going through the budget and seeing where things are going. And I think there's other people out there who are interested in similar stuff. So thank you guys so much for being here and bringing this up.
well, thanks for having us.
yes, thank you.
Of course.
You're doing good work here.
So like here, where can we find you guys on Instagram?
We're on Instagram. If you just look us up, Friends of Little Cottonwood Canyon. We're also on X. We also are on Facebook.
And it's all Friends of Little Cottonwood.
Friends of Little Cottonwood Canyon.
Okay, is that the website too?
Yes, we're lccfriends.org.